Judy Blume has won every writing award you can think of, practically, including the Library of Congress Living Legend Award and the National Book Foundation Medal for Distinguished Contribution to American Letters. And if you're a woman my age, that is, a Gen Xer, chances are good that you grew up with the guidance of her books. She got us through childhood adventures, being a sibling, puberty, first love, divorce, and even medical complications. Hello and welcome to The Best Book Ever, the podcast where we get to know interesting people by asking them about their favorite book. I'm your host, Julie Strauss, and today I'm joined by my dear friend, Lisa Dayton Petersen. Lisa and I have been friends since college, and we have been talking about books pretty much nonstop ever since then. A few months ago, we started talking about the influence Judy Blume's books have had on our lives, and we agreed to spend the summer revisiting her books so that we could talk about them on the show. We talked about how it felt to read her books as kids, how it feels today as adults, especially now that her work is the subject of what feels like nonstop attacks and book banning attempts. I know you're going to love hearing why we think Judy Blume writes the best books ever. Hello, Lisa. Welcome to the Best Book Ever podcast.
Hi, Julie. Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
I'm so excited to talk to you, one of my favorite people to talk books with, about one of my favorite authors ever. Probably, I don't think it's an exaggeration to say, probably the foundational author of my life. Do you think you'd go so far as to say that about Judy Blume?
100%. When I was going back over I reread like my 5 favorite books of hers, getting ready for this. And I realized she helped me form a foundation of loving reading for the rest of my life. And I was thinking, like, she's amazing even for people who were not given the gift of the love of reading by their parents. Like my mom modeled reading, and then she also read to us on vacations. And even if you didn't have that, if you happened to pick up a Judy Blume book, I think it would help you learn to love reading. So she's amazing.
Did your mom just encourage you completely to read whatever you wanted to read, or did she police it at all?
Not at all. My one big memory of my childhood is she would read Little House on the Prairie books to us when we were going on family vacations. Cause like they were really long rides. We were stuck in like a VW bus with stripes on it, one of those old buses. Mm-hmm. And she would read Little House on the Prairie books to us. And we just loved it. And so she was just really into us learning to read. So she would take us to the library every week and we would check out books. And then when I got older, I just read and read like crazy. And she didn't care at all. Around that age when I think the scandalous Judy Blume books were coming out, my parents got divorced. And I think she was just like, as long as the kids aren't in jail, they're fine. So she did not care at all about what we were reading. So I felt fully free to read whatever I wanted.
What kind of reader are you right now?
I think it's funny. The pandemic got me out of reading because I became obsessed with binge watching Netflix. And I am now back into reading again. I go to bed earlier and I'm reading before I go to bed. And I also read in the mornings on the weekends. And during the day, after work, I'll listen to books on tape when I'm walking or when I'm cleaning the house. Actually, when Emma, my daughter, started handing me books to read, and I was like, what? Why am I not reading? And now I'm just loving it again. And I can't wait to go to bed. I got into fantasy through Emma, reading along with her. She'd be so excited about her books. And so I would read along with her. It started with Harry Potter. And then this cat series. I don't know if you are aware of this. It's a whole series about cats who have their own world, warrior cats.
I think that Jack has mentioned those on the kids' YA episodes, and he has just been hooked for years.
Yeah, they're amazing. But for me, myself, I read mysteries. I love to read biographies. I feel like I can really learn about my own life and how to improve myself. Oh my God. And I love self-help books and cookbooks. I will lay in bed with piles of cookbooks and plan. You know, what's funny is I guess I was thinking I've got away from reading, but actually I think I haven't. I think the more we talk about it, it's like they're in our lives more than we realize, because when I'm laying in bed with 5 cookbooks on my lap, that's reading.
That's reading. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of Emma, your lovely daughter, I have had her on the show. We talked about a sci-fi novel, Ted Chiang's Story of Your Life, which was a fantastic read. And as I told her that I frequently tell guests who choose fantasy and sci-fi, I would never have picked it up on my own. And then she, and then you, through her, got me hooked on the Court of Thorns and Roses series. So what I want to ask you is, Emma's a young adult now. What would be your best advice to young parents or parents of younger children as to how to raise a reader?
It was really intentional. I wanted her to love reading because it just enhances your life so much. And also, it can be a friend when you're somewhere and you're lonely or when you don't have something to do. I just always read to her, even when she was tiny. You know, when she was a baby, it was like touchy-feely books. Then when she was little, I would put them in the crib with her and she would sit in the crib and look at the books. I put like 10 books in there. She was amused for a while. And then every night before she went to bed, you know, she would have her bath and then I would read books to her and it would just get longer and longer. At first it was 2 books and pretty soon reading like 10 books, but it really was part of the evening rituals. And then she saw that I read and her dad read. And so it was just part of what you do.
I ask this question of my guests a lot, and I really think it comes down to if it's just habit. What I have noticed when I talk to guests about raising readers is they frequently say exactly what you said, that it just came down to, it was just part of our daily life, which I think is so interesting because it's really easy to turn it into a job or some expectation of successful parenting or something like that when you really can't force it.
And also not to decide what they need to read, but to allow them to choose whatever they want. Because we did used to go to the library all the time and I didn't care what she read, just wanted her to be reading. So I think that's a big point too. Because I remember someone said their kid didn't like to read and only wanted to read comic books, but that's still reading.
That's reading.
You know, and that could grow into something else. So I guess you shouldn't have a judgment on what they choose. Because I wouldn't have gotten into fantasy. That was really something she loved to read.
You know, normally on this podcast, we sort of focus on one book. With each episode, you and I are talking about Judy Blume and the role she played in our lives. Do you remember how you came across her? Because when I started thinking about this, I cannot remember not knowing Judy Blume books.
You know, it's so funny because I was thinking about that too. And I realized my reading of her books went way back to like maybe 2nd and 3rd grade, because there was Tales of a Fourth Grade Nothing and Sally J. Friedman as herself. And I was like, whoa, I was reading her long before Are You There, Gonna See Margaret? So I have no idea. I do not recall. When I went back and looked at all the books, it just went through my whole life. She was just right there and she's a genius. I don't know how she does it.
As you got older, did you graduate to her adult books?
I did move into her adult books. And it's funny, when I went to the library, someone there was helping me. She's like, oh, I didn't know Judy Blume had adult books.
Yeah.
I'm like, yes. And they didn't have any. So she's like, I'm going to request the adult books be brought into the library. So just going in there, talking to the librarians, is helping us bring Judy Blume to the world even more.
So we conceived this idea several months ago, and then we both made a pact to reread a bunch of Judy Blume books before we talked. Tell me the ones that you reread, and did you read any new to you books as in preparation for this conversation?
I think I had read all of Judy Blume's books. So I decided to reread the ones that were the most important to me. So those were Tales of Fourth Grade Nothing, Blubber, Deanie, Sally J. Friedman, Ethel herself, Are You There, God, It's Me, Margaret, and then Forever, which was the only one I didn't reread, which I'm going to.
I read all of those, and I also read It's Not the End of the World, which is the one about the little girl whose parents get divorced.
Oh, okay. Good one.
And I'm very proud to say that I belong to 2 libraries here. And Are You There, God, It's Me, Margaret? They both have many copies of that one, and they have been checked out since you and I last talked about this.
Yeah.
Which made me really happy because that is one of the most challenged books.
It's insane. We all know that.
Which is insane.
Crazy town.
Why do you think people are so terrified of that book?
So I think it's an attack on women. I think it's all connected to stopping women from understanding their bodies, talking about their bodies, having control over their bodies. We all need that to be free. And if you don't have control over your body, how can you have any control over your world or make any strides forward or make any demands, make any decisions? You can't move. You're held down. And I think it's all tied to that. I think it's fear. People are afraid of losing power, losing what power they have. And they're trying to control women. And it's really funny because when I was in my 20s, my daughter's age, I really was like free to do whatever. I didn't see what was happening. And now that the younger generation, our kids in their 20s, they're calling it out where we were living through it and didn't see it. Mm-hmm. So I feel so happy that the kids in their 20s, they see what's happening and they're fighting against it. And I think because they are fighting against it, like the pendulum is swinging and there's fear out in the world and they're trying to push it down. It's not going to work, but they're trying to push it down, but we're not going to allow it.
But it really made me start thinking about the things that scare us as a society. There's nothing shocking in that book. It is literally little girls who don't know really all that much about what's about to happen to their body. Mm-hmm. And it's a thing that happens to basically every human female. And we have designated it as so scary that we actually throw around words like pornographic. And it's just constantly being banned. And it's mystifying to me because it's a book essentially about basic biology. There are no moral choices being made in that book that you can disagree with.
Yeah, that's what I think it's about, control.
Did you find that you remembered the books as you reread them over this summer?
I'm so glad you asked that because I was super shocked about Deanie because that was such an important book to me. That was the one about the girl whose mom wants her to be a model and her sister's a smart one. And then she has scoliosis. And I just remember it. I was so excited to read it. It was the second one I read. And I was just super excited because I felt so connected to it as a kid. And I read it and I went, this is a children's book. And I do not remember it as being a children's book. I remember it as being an adult book about adult experiences. And that's when I realized she is a total genius because I didn't realize it was written to the level of someone who was however old I was, 12.
Are you saying that when you read it when you were a kid, you felt like you were reading something very mature?
Yes. Uh-huh. Yes. And when I read it now, I was totally shocked. I expected to have all the feelings again. And I remember when I read about the t-shirt that she was supposed to wear under the brace, as a kid, I remember being able to feel the t-shirt. I remember the t-shirt and it was fantastic. Another thing that came out for me, I was excited to talk about this, is I feel like parents can really learn from reading Judy Blume's books because she talks about things that are affecting the kids, things that they're interpreting from their world, like things their mom says, how it affects them, things their dad says. And I'm like, this is great information for parents. She talks about how her mother puts her in a box, like you are this, and your sister, you are that. Exactly. And a parent, it can help you as a parent be like, oh, don't do that. Because when you're parenting, you're just going through life and you're also having to live your own life and pay your own bills. And sometimes we completely forget or don't see how what we're saying or doing is affecting our children. So it would be a great thing for parents to read your books too, because you learn so much from that.
I think that's what I like the most. Also, rereading all of these is because it was occurring to me as I was rereading them that these kids in her books are fully formed people. Yeah. And they're not in relation, they have families, they have parents, they have siblings and all that, but they have inner lives. And I think that's why they did always feel just slightly too mature for us, because these kids had thoughts and were interesting, flawed people, so different than so many other children's books. I was particularly struck by Blubber this time around because as I reread this one, I thought the main character is a straight up bully.
Yes.
And
I was surprised by that too. I didn't look that way.
And I mean, she learns a lesson at the end, but what an interesting. And the premise of that book is a group of the popular kids start teasing a chubby girl in their class and really bullying her
very harshly.
A lot.
I didn't recall that. Almost like physically.
Yeah, it was rough.
Very surprised by that when I read it. I didn't remember that.
And then the comeuppance happens is that the main character, they eventually turn on her, which of course bullies always turn back on someone else.
Mm-hmm. I think it's a sign of showing a difference in our times too. Like, I could be totally wrong and living in La La Land, but I think it was more acceptable to kind of let kids bully more than it is now.
Oh, yeah.
So I think that's also a sign of the changes, that have been going on.
What are your thoughts on Forever? That's the one that was treated like contraband in my school. I read Forever in 5th grade.
Oh, wow. I didn't know how old I was when I read it. I have no concept.
And the premise of that one, listeners, is that it's I think she's a high school senior or maybe junior, and she has her first serious boyfriend and they lose their virginity to each other. Mm-hmm. And it's quite frank. It's not graphic. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't call it graphic, but it's frank. It's clear about what's going on.
It's super important to read about that. And it didn't have any effect on me, on my own decisions to like run out and have sex or something like
right.
It doesn't have any effect like that. It's just more like validating your feelings around that subject and that everyone has feelings around that subject and that it's something we all think about and part of our lives forever. And again, my mom was like, sure, read it. I don't even probably know what it was about, but I didn't hide it from her that I was reading it or anything.
That's my other theory about Judy Blume is a lot of women our age, the sort of the Gen X age. I know I'm making a sweeping generalization, but a lot of us did not have mothers who were open and willing to talk about a lot of these things that had to do with our bodies or puberty or growing up, even the bullying or the overactive imaginations like Sally J. Friedman, and frequently when I talk to women our age about the influence of Judy Blume, a lot of women will say, my mom didn't tell me this stuff. Judy Blume taught me about periods. Judy Blume taught me about having a boyfriend. And so I suspect part of her outsized reputation, not outsized, it's a very well-deserved reputation, is because we could rely on her for answers.
Oh, that's a wonderful way to look at it. Yeah, she was validating our thoughts and our questions and what was happening in our lives. There was no judgment.
No judgment.
Yeah. Wow. That's a great way to look at it. So true.
Yeah. I mean, I still wouldn't know what periods were if I hadn't read it.
No, my mom was a nurse. She told us all.
Oh, so you had a mom who talked to you.
She talked to us about it. I have a funniest story. I wonder if you had, I don't know if I told you about this, but about having my period. Like I was 14 and everyone already had their period. So that's why I really identified with that book too, because I was totally waiting for mine. But I actually ordered from one of those teeny bopper magazines a period box. Are you familiar with
Yes, it supposedly had everything you needed in it.
Mm-hmm. It was probably like the width of like a coffee table. I tried everything on. They even had the belt. I wore the belt to bed. I wore like a training pad. It was the best. It was that whole time. The book wrapped around with my big period box. Like, really remember that.
Well, I don't remember the belts ever being part of my life.
Me either, but it was in the box.
It was just an old-fashioned.
From the 60s. It's been given away, stuff they had in the warehouse. I don't know, but I did wear it for practice around the house when I went there. Oh my God. I also have a funny story about buying the book Forever. So I had a bestie and we used to go to the bookstore. We would ride our bikes everywhere. We'd go buy candy and then tons of candy, by the way. And then we would buy books that I really wanted to buy Forever, but I was super shy. I was embarrassed and my friend was very outgoing. And so I got her to buy the book for me. I gave her the money and she bought the book for me and I'm standing there. We're like at the counter. And after she bought it, she's like, here, this is yours. And I was so mad at her. She bought it. Got planned the whole time. I don't know. But anyway, she gave me my smutty.
Smutty. Yeah. See, our word was dirty. And that was the thing about the Forever book because it got passed around our school and it automatically fell to the pages of and I'm using finger quotes here, the dirty parts. We all knew exactly what pages were the dirty parts. But it was so good. You know, looking at it now, I'm thinking, what a funny way to describe it. I don't know, compared to many, many books that my kids have brought home, it's so tame and it's so plainly realistic.
Mm-hmm.
Two things came out this year in regards to Judy Blume. There's a documentary called Judy Blume Forever, which was really well reviewed, and also really popular Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret adaptation. Have you seen either of those?
Both. And I also listened to an interview, I think it was Terry Gross. I was so impressed by her. Like, she continues to be so honest and she continues to be so helpful by being honest. She talked about how she's living in Florida now and how the governor there has, is banning a lot of books. And in some of the schools, you're not allowed to ask about your period, ask about your body. And if you ask the teacher's not allowed to respond. So that is terrifying. I hate to hear that, but it's super important for us to know what's going on so that we can fight against it in our voting and in our just educating ourselves. But I assumed reading this book that she's a perfect parent. She understands her kids. She is an amazing, perfect parent. Terry Gross actually did say, well, you must have been like the best parent. And she said, no, I actually have so many regrets. And she talked about how when she got divorced, she herself became like a teenager. So let her kids just do whatever and wasn't a parent enough to her kids during that time. And she had regrets. And I went again, thank you, Judy Blume, because no one, even Judy Blume, is a perfect parent. We all look back. We all have regrets. And I actually think about it a lot. No one can be a perfect parent. Even
Judy Blume.
She's perfect. But she went off and did her own thing when she says her kids needed her, and she went back and talked to her kids about it. But again, I can just thank her for continuing to help me by being so honest and understanding. I don't know. I was impressed by that.
Even to this day, she's just presenting whole, well-rounded, flawed people.
Exactly.
Instead of idealized. And that's what makes us trust her so much.
Exactly. She's not idealized. And I was idealizing her. And it's important that we know no one's perfect. Even when we try, we sure tried hard to be perfect. And it is not possible.
I think she owns a bookstore, right? In Florida?
Yes, that's right. She did say that. She does.
Can you imagine how bizarre it must be to own a bookstore when you are the author of maybe aside from, I don't know, J.K. Rowling? Her books are the most banned children's books I can think of.
Insane. What did you think of the documentary?
Okay, I haven't seen anything yet. I was going to watch them last night.
It's good.
I'm going to watch the movie tonight. And I'll tell you about the movie, the Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret movie. When I saw that it was being made, my immediate reaction was absolutely not. I will never watch it. It's too special. And then the talk that I have heard from people I genuinely trust, people have said to me, they got it right. You will feel the same way watching this movie as you felt when you used to read the book. So tell me your impression of it.
I did feel that way. I was really also on the fence about watching it. She said people came to her wanting to make the movie, and she always said no until this director came and told Judy Blume her vision of how she was going to make the movie. And then the director had her on set the whole time. So that's why Judy Blume finally said, yes, I'll make the movie. And it's great.
Okay, great. That's a big word. It really is great.
Well, I really enjoyed it. Totally. What's fun for me is I lived in New Jersey and worked in New York, and so many of them take place in New Jersey and New York. That's a special connection for me too.
A few years ago, it's probably 10 years by now, she wrote a book about the New Jersey town she grew up in the unlikely event.
Oh, okay. I have not read that.
Elizabeth, New Jersey.
Oh, see, I live 15 minutes from Elizabeth, New Jersey. So
are you serious? That. Oh, you got to read this one.
Yeah. Wow. Okay, cool. Another thing she said was that Sally J. Friedman as herself was the most autobiographical of the books that she wrote. And she said, because the relationship between her relationship with it was more truthful about the relationship she had with her mom and the relationship she had with her dad. I just thought that was really neat to put it out there that it's normal to have parents who love you, but your relationship can be difficult or sometimes great and sometimes difficult. Sometimes you have a closer relationship with one parent and the other parent annoys you. To put that out there as normal, but you're still loved, but that people are different.
My takeaway from rereading that, first of all, I was really surprised at how I remembered these books almost line for line. And especially, I didn't realize I knew Sally J. Friedman as well as I did. And I feel like she was always the one I related to most as a kid, because even though our situations were very different, but she had that overactive imagination, which was hilarious to me. For listeners who haven't read that one, it's post-World War II, and her family has to move from New Jersey to Florida for her brother's health. And Sally gets convinced that Adolf Hitler is living in a retirement community there in Florida. And she was so
worried. It was so
worried. And half the time I was laughing so hard at her imagination. And other times I was going, oh, I know this feeling where you invent something in your head and it's so real and you panic about it. And then at one point her brother says, you really think Hitler lives in Miami? And she immediately goes, oh yeah, duh. That's and I thought, I know this kid so well. No wonder I love this book so much.
That is so interesting because I don't have an imagination like that. I wish I did, but that's not how my brain works. And it's interesting that Judy Blume said this is most autobiographical to her, and she's a writer, and so are you. So that's interesting. It's just emphasizing the fact, too, how important it is for our kids to read, because we still remember the feelings we had when we were reading it. And if you don't read, if you aren't given the opportunity, that's a real loss. Like it really was a positive experience in our lives, and it would be a loss if they didn't have them.
That's that great line from You've Got Mail, right? With it, Kathleen Kelly has the bookstore, and when she kind of goes on her rant about kids' books, and she says nothing ever imprints on you the way the books you read as a kid. That came to life for me as I was rereading these books, and I realized these are part of my DNA, these Judy Blume. And I was there are a lot of books that I read over and over again as a kid, but nothing quite like these. It was really kind of astonishing to revisit them and just realize how deeply they were imprinted.
Yeah.
I love her. I wish I could meet her.
Yes. You can send her this podcast and we'll have dinner with her.
So Lisa, tell me, what are you reading right now?
Right now I'm reading, I think it's the last Sarah J. Maas in that series, The Court of Silver Flames.
Okay, so you're on the last one, so you must be enjoying, because I quit on book 3. I got bored, but you enjoyed it and you kept going.
Yes. And this is book 5. It's all about Nesta. Everything's from her perspective, Feyre's sister. And I love it. Em said it was her favorite one too. And I am obsessed with it. Like, I can't wait to go to bed because I'm going to read it some more.
I think what I need to do is go back to the third one in paper so that I can skip the war stuff, because that's when I got bored.
The war stuff.
It was so boring.
But you have to like it. It's okay if you don't like the books.
Oh, I know. I'm all for quitting books. Will you quit a book?
If I don't like it, I will stop reading it. Yeah, I get bored. No.
But you like this one.
Yes,
you
very
like
much.
Series.
I enjoy it very much. And also, it's also really fun to read the same book as Emma. But I wouldn't read it if I didn't like it. And I really am enjoying it very much.
Emma told me on the podcast that it was bird porn.
Bird porn, yeah. There's a lot of sex in this one, and it is good. And I have to say, it's not pornography. It's not smutty. It's just fun.
Yeah, I'm all for a smutty read. We already know this about me.
It's part of the story. It's not just smutty for smutty. It's part of the story. It's great. She does a good job in that area.
Are you going to go on to other Sarah J. Maas series? Because she's got several series. And gosh, people love her books.
I don't know. Next, I'm going to read some of the Judy Blume adult books, because now I'm on a Judy Blume thing. I want to read Forever again. I need to find it. Just looking at the cover, like I probably have that book in storage.
Mm-hmm.
That book is like torn edges. I Must have been that a million times. So I'm very excited to reread that book. But I'm always reading my self-help books. So I don't know what else I'm going to be reading. I don't know.
That's a good position to be in.
I'm open. Maybe when I go through a couple of your podcasts I haven't gone through yet, I'm going to get some ideas.
All right. Lisa, I love talking books with you. It is always so fun. I hope you'll come back anytime you have a book you want to talk to me about. And thank you for joining me today.
Thank you. You made it easy. And I always love talking to you. I always love talking about books.
It's the best.
Thank you for inviting me.
Bookworms, I would love to hear your thoughts about Judy Blume. Have you read her books either when you were young or do you read them now? Do you want to start reading them? Let me know over on Instagram at Best Book Ever Podcast. If you enjoyed this conversation, make sure you check out when Lisa's daughter Emma joined me on episode 138, and we talked about Ted Chiang's story of your life. Links to everything else Lisa and I discussed today are available in the show notes. If you want to learn more about my weekly guests, as well as get a little peek into what I'm reading and listening to in my free time, subscribe to my weekly pod newsletter at bestbookever.substack.com. The newsletter is free, but once you get there, you'll be able to see a few different paid options if you want to help me keep the candles burning over here in my reading cave. Thanks for joining me today, and as always, I will see you at the library.